far back as 2250 BC, the Code of Hammurabi recognized that children are not fully responsible for their actions. But the question, how old must a child be before he is accountable to society, has always posed a problem. The ancient Hebrews looked upon puberty as the turning point. If a youth's voice was changing and he needed a shave, he could be charged with a crime. For the Muslims, puberty and responsibility came at 16. The Emperor Justinian placed the line at 14 for boys and 12 for girls, while young children, according to Roman law, were in the same category as lunatics. English law, growing out of the harsh Anglo-Saxon tradition, determined the guilt of a child by circumstances. If he appeared to know right from wrong, the youthful offender could be tried and sentenced as an adult. Thus, when a boy in 1488 killed a playmate and indicated he knew it was wrong by saying that the blood on his clothing came from a nosebleed, he was found guilty of murder and hanged at the age of 9. In the American colonies, children who were disrespectful to their parents could be placed in the stocks, publicly whipped, and even put to death. As late as 1819, Illinois passed a law which decreed that any child or servant who disobeyed his parent or master should be jailed until he humbled himself. While there was no way to charge a parent with neglecting his child, a youngster found hungry, begging, or homeless could be jailed. Such children were not placed in orphanages because people believed a neglected child was sure to exhibit criminal tendencies and would therefore contaminate the helpless orphans. So any child or infant unlucky enough to be neglected was immediately jailed in a regular penal institution, along with those youngsters who had broken the law, and the adult murderers, prostitutes, beggars, feeble-minded, and lunatics. Americans characteristically believed that the solid citizens owed no one a living. There was plenty of work to be done, and any child who became a public charge was expected to do his share by being bound up to work for anyone who was willing to pay the cost of his keep. In Baltimore, the demand for this cut-rate labor became so acute that the authorities were unable to fill all the applications. So in 1827, a bill was passed to help them meet the demand. It gave any justice of the peace or trustee of the poor in Baltimore City or county the power to arrest any child who appeared to him to be destitute and place him in the poorhouse so he could be bound out to work. It was halfway through the 19th century before Baltimore built its first institution especially devoted to juveniles who had gotten into trouble with the law. It was called the House of Refuge, and it spent about 13 cents a day on the care of its charges. In those days, a 12-year-old didn't have to go to school so long as he had a steady job, but he was not supposed to work more than 10 hours a day. Street vendors could hire children to work in the streets for them, but they had to be at least 8 years old. City ordinances made it unlawful for anyone under 18 to go bowling or look at any publication containing news about crimes or stories involving bloodshed. No one under 16 could work as a singer, dancer, or musician. And no one under 14 could be employed as an acrobat, tightrope walker, or bareback rider. There were lots of laws, and any child who ran afoul of them was tried and judged and sentenced just like an adult. It was the turn of the century before a court devoted specifically to the handling of cases involving juveniles was established. When Baltimore's juvenile court came into being in the year 1902, there were only 2 others like it in the country. Its basic concept was revolutionary. It would treat the youngster as a child first, and only secondarily as a lawbreaker. It would look upon the illegal behavior of the child not so much as an offense, but as a symptom of trouble in the child or in his home. And it would judge the youthful offender not as guilty of a crime, but as being delinquent. And it would not conduct formal trial procedures, but informal hearings in chancery. Finally, this would not be a court of record. That is, the youngster would not have a criminal history of arrest and conviction. During its first decade of operation, the Baltimore Juvenile Court heard an average of 2,000 cases a year involving youngsters under 16 who were charged with such offenses as bathing in the harbor, driving a horse and wagon unlawfully, playing ball in the street, working on Sunday, and unlawfully interfering with trolley cars. In time, the juvenile court idea spread throughout the surrounding counties as well, so that by 1965, A total of more than 18,000 cases a year were being heard in the state of Maryland as a whole. But now the youngsters were not being brought into court for interfering with trolley cars. Now they were being charged with crimes of increasing seriousness and violence: arson, assault, yoking, grand larceny, and sex offenses. The teenager and his younger brothers and sisters appear to be going in for crime in a big way. And there are a lot of reasons why. Adolescence is a time for crisis. The youngster is breaking away from home and family and finding a place for himself in a substitute family known as the crowd. His biological urges may be very intense, while his emotions are extremely immature. He seeks examples to emulate. What will they be? His desire for possessions far outdistances his economic ability to provide them for himself. If his background is disadvantaged, he may translate his economic inferiority into resentment against those who have more than he does. He could channel his energies into hard work to improve his condition. But work, for the sheer satisfaction of it, is out of style today. Getting smart is the in thing. On the other hand, a youngster who has had everything he ever asked for may simply have run out of kicks by the time he reaches the teen years. He may search restlessly for a more exciting challenge, something Dad can't buy him, something he can do all on his own, like pulling a stick up or copying something on the run. Juvenile arrest statistics do not necessarily mean that teenagers commit the most crimes. We have to remember that 1/2 of our population is under 25. The figures do indicate, though, that the teenager's bravado, coupled with his inexperience, causes him to get caught the most. And now that the teenager has been caught, what will happen? In most communities of the state, the youthful offender will be arrested in the same way an adult offender would be. He will be taken to the station in a squad car and interrogated. All of this at the hands of uniformed and armed officers. His parents may not know his whereabouts for some time. There have been complaints about this, particularly in regard to the methods used by some officers to obtain information from youngsters. The question has been raised, what are the constitutional rights of children? Are they still in a class with lunatics and indentured servants? Or are they entitled to the safeguards the Constitution guarantees? Are they told that what they say may incriminate them? Is a parent present during their interrogation? This is a juvenile squad at work. Detectives Joseph Kelly and Flan Couch.
Taken into custody, and by telling them or going into constitutional rights, they don't know what you're talking about to begin with, and they don't understand you. We contact their parents immediately, and at this time is where we would advise the parent of the child's constitutional rights, that the child doesn't have to tell us anything if he doesn't want to, that he is entitled to an attorney. We have instituted a program in which we call it the Station House Probation. This means that this child comes to us once a week on a Saturday and reports to us. We ask him what he's done during the week, how is he behaving at home, how is he behaving in school, what is his marks, is he going to church? And sometimes the kids try to wiggle their way out of it and tell us something, but we have it there in black and white and we'll show them. Look, Daddy, this is what we have on you. This is what we found out this week. So pretty soon the kids see that you're out after their interests, that you're really trying to help them, and they usually start coming around and shaping up. Now, I wish that all the districts had juvenile squads, but unfortunately they don't. We haven't the manpower right now. Only 4 of the 9 police districts do. Flan and I have both taken courses within psychology in order to learn how to deal with the kids.
And it's a good way to distinguish a boy from anything else is he's going to get into a little trouble. And he wouldn't be a boy if he didn't. A boy's going to be a boy. In the ghettos. And, well, you know what that means. His father probably drinks or his mother drinks. He's never getting attention. Comes in with a load on. He wants to beat the heck out of the kid for no apparent reason whatsoever. So where's the kid going to get any, actually get any real home training from? He can't get it that way. And another reason, they pick up this, I'll tell you about this jazz language they pick up. They want to be, that's the in crowd more or less, you know. He's say, hey babe, what's happening out here? Let's get down, let's find some action, you know. Let's get into something tonight. Well, if he goes home, his old man drunk, he's speaking incoherent anyway, you know, you don't know what the heck he's talking about, so the kid develop his own language. This thing is too broad. It seems like this is the age of, what you might say, it's just a transition period or something they're going through. There's so many fears. They're feared, like I said before, they're afraid to go to service. They don't want it. They're young. Somebody's picketing here, flare-ups there, flare-ups. That's a whole lot of things. He's really confused. The mother's working, father's working, nobody's home, and he's on his own. I don't think he'll ever get to it, as long as this whole world is twisted that way. We're just as much responsible for this as we're trying to lay it on the kid, but it's not the kid, it's the grown-ups. That's really started, if you want to really know the truth about it. That's it. He doesn't have a damn thing to do.
Not all juvenile court petitions are filed by policemen. Social workers or truant officers or school nurses or even ordinary citizens who feel that children are not receiving the proper care and supervision can apply to juvenile court for a hearing. If they charge the parents with contributing to the neglect of the child and the judge upholds the charge, a parent can be sent to jail for 2 years. Juvenile court is designed to be a friend to the child. For this reason, he does not need a lawyer, but can have one if he or his parents want it. He may have witnesses appear on his behalf, and he is entitled to a jury trial if he wants it. If he disagrees with the court's decision, he may appeal. But in the 52,000 cases heard in the last 20 years, not a single appeal has been filed. Once the court has gotten the facts, its decision can be made, not necessarily on the basis of what the youngster needs, but on what services are available to help him or her at that particular time. A child can be left at home with his parents with a warning to everyone involved to do better in the future. Or the child can be committed to the Department of Welfare for their decision as to whether to leave him at home with a social worker supervising the case or to remove him into foster care. But it's hard enough to find foster homes for the lovable little ones. Who wants a teenager who has already gotten into trouble? About half of the juveniles found to be delinquent are placed on probation, left at home under the supervision of a probation officer. The trouble is, kids in trouble often need a man to work with them, and there just aren't enough experienced men to do the job. This probation worker has a caseload of over 50 most of the time. This means that no matter how much trouble a youngster is having, the worker may be able to see her only about once a month. It's a tough, discouraging job. It isn't very well paid, and the turnover is terrific. About 30% of the juveniles found delinquent in Baltimore City are sent to training school. It's a far cry from the old house of refuge and its tab of 13 cents a day. Now, training school costs about $3,500 annually per youngster. They get schooling, medical care, physical fitness programs, and vocational training. For many, it's a better life than they ever had at home. This is Miss Margaret Frederick.
You often find that the child is the scapegoat. The kid who comes here is the scapegoat for the whole family. They sort of, if you were doing a family kind of therapy, you'd find they kind of shrug off and push off their guilt onto this kid, and she's the whipping boy for the rest of them. Kids, other kids in the family and parents too. I think that the most important thing we do for these children, really, is to show them that they are worthwhile as people, that they are important, that they can do things well. We stress teaching and training in every aspect of living here in the school. We get girls from all over the state, from every economic level, every kind of home and family. There's a broken home. There's been no training. The child hasn't had a chance to develop as a person. And the homes that are broken by discord are uglier than the homes that are broken by divorce. The kid who comes from a wealthy, cultured family where they've just degenerated into bitterly feuding, fighting factions is as lost as the kid who comes from the poorest home. As a matter of fact, those children, the kids from wealthy homes, are more difficult to work with. They've social polish and manners, and they've had things. And as one kid said, "What can you do for me? You can't give me anything." Poor kids are delighted to have food and a clean bed. Their kids are hostile towards society. Why shouldn't they be? If your family don't want you and nobody else wants you and you're stuck here and you stay here and you stay here and you wait and wait and wait and you don't have much hope here because you're so full of hate that you really can't fit into things around here and you don't have anything to go to outside of the institution, that requires the patience and the attributes of a saint. I think some of them resist going home and deliberately misbehave to get back here because they really have nothing out there. And I don't mean simply physical things like beds and meals and so on. They not only don't have that, they don't have clothes, they don't have moral and emotional support from families, and they panic inside when the time comes to leave the institution. This is a small minority of kids, but it's there. And for those children, the security of an institution like a halfway house would bridge the gap. I think you'd find as you approach poverty and all the problems of the inner city, I think you'll find that we have to change our ideas about institutions.
Every one of these institutions is so badly overcrowded that the average stay for a youngster has to be kept down to about 5 months. That isn't much time in which to try to change patterns of behavior that have been years in the making, even with the help of a social worker when she gets out, to check on the company she's keeping and how late she's staying out. Nobody knows for sure how much good any of this does a teenager in trouble. Even the sociologists disagree on the results. Some say it's impossible to judge the system fairly because we have never had enough training school facilities or probation officers or social workers to do the job well. They point to a few outstanding case histories, the boys and girls who left training school to become not only law-abiding citizens, but police officers and even top executives. Studies, however, have indicated that only a small percentage go straight after they come out. Perhaps 1 in 10 has no more trouble with the law. On the other hand, 90% of the inmates in adult penal institutions have a history of juvenile delinquency. So the question arises, should penalties be stiffer for juvenile offenders? Is being placed on probation or even being sent to training school enough? One criminologist cites the case of a boy who had a weakness for hard-top convertibles. He stole 3 of them, and each time was treated as a child and placed on probation with a warning to behave himself. Then he had a birthday, which made him too old for a hearing in juvenile court. The next time he stole a car, he had to appear in criminal court, where the judge sentenced him to a term in the penitentiary. The youth was shocked. He said, "I didn't think stealing a car was that serious." One of the items we must add to our list of the causes of delinquency is the baffling set of inconsistencies in our laws, which serve to make youngsters lose respect for the law. For example, in the state of Maryland, a 19-year-old boy cannot marry without parental consent, nor vote, nor order a glass of beer. But he can be drafted and he can drive. In fact, he can drive over to the District of Columbia and order a glass of beer. But if he brings a can back with him in the car, he can be arrested. To the youngsters, all of this is a joke. Other inconsistencies in the law aren't so funny. They make for very unequal justice. It's the same old question that troubled the lawmakers of 2000 BC. At what age does a youth become responsible for his acts? In the United States as a whole, the upper age limit for juvenile offenders varies from 16 to 21. Even in the greater Baltimore area, there is a variance. At the present time, the Baltimore City Juvenile Court does not hear cases involving youngsters who have passed the age of 15, while in the surrounding counties, the juvenile court jurisdiction goes up to the age 18. This means that if a boy of 17 commits a crime in the city, he will be tried as an adult in criminal court and will be liable to receive a prison sentence. But if the same youth steps across the city line and commits the same crime in Baltimore County, he will be tried as a juvenile, receive no criminal record, and at worst, spend a few months in training school. Recently, this law was changed, but it will be at least 3 years before one age limit for juvenile offenders will apply uniformly throughout the state, simply because services and facilities will need to be doubled in order to comply with the new law. So according to all the people who deal firsthand with juvenile crime, the answer is always more. More specially trained police officers, more probation personnel and social workers, more training school facilities, and most of all, a more adequate home life where a youngster is taught to respect the rights and property of others. And what does it take to achieve this? In the words of a judge we spoke with, the chief cause of juvenile delinquency is not money, either too little of it or too much of it. It is simply an inadequate relationship within the family. If the relationship between parent and child is good, no matter how poor the people are, their children will stay out of trouble. But if the relationship within the family is poor, no matter how much money there is in the home, the children are likely to go astray. Our present-day methods of dealing with juvenile offenders are the best we know of and represent enormous progress since the day when preschoolers had to work for a living and 9-year-old delinquents were hanged. But we still have a long way to go in learning what makes youngsters get into trouble and what is the best way of dealing with them when they do. It is certain, though, that the time for ignoring the problem, for turning our backs upon it because somebody else's children are involved, is long past. Juvenile crime affects every taxpayer, every parent whose children mingle with other children, every person who runs a business or owns a car or even walks in the streets. All of us are involved. And it is time we began asking ourselves some hard questions. Questions like, what effect do lewd motion pictures, suggestive popular songs, and pornographic magazines have on our teenagers? What can be done about the parents who leave their youngsters to fend for themselves in the streets at night? What facilities does my neighborhood have where teenagers can have fun without doing harm? These hard questions deserve the earnest consideration of everyone, and the time to begin thinking about them is now.